No problem. Okay. Yeah, then let's continue. Welcome back to class. We will be learning about game theory basics. And game theory, as some of you know, probably is a field of study at the intersection of mathematics and economics. So it combines these two fields, and it considers an economic system to be a game, and basically people to be the players, right? We saw that already in the last class, where we have like a very well-defined setting, and the agents or the players have certain actions available to them, and then the outcomes of these actions are known to all the players. And according to the rules of the game, it analyzes the player's best strategies and then uses this analysis to explain the observed behavior of economic systems. So we tried that a little bit, or I tried that to show a little bit with the Cournot example, where you could actually derive the optimal solution from the perspective of a Nash equilibrium for the production quantities. And in general, game theory is a very interesting and powerful tool because it's fairly simple and intuitive. I mean, of course, everything gets very complex if you dig deep enough, but the first applications are quite intuitive to understand, and I will hope to show you this. And it's extremely powerful to make predictions. And I think it's a good idea for all of you to actually experience this and to give you some general background knowledge in this. So let's look at the outline of the lesson. So we will talk about what is game theory. We will define what is a game. Then we will look what different types of games there are. We will also look at some common games. We will talk about games that have been analyzed for quite a long time and quite extensively in game theory, and which we will also see in daily life, like literally everywhere. And then we will talk about the concept of Nash equilibrium. And I want to give you more background on that. And then we will also talk about equilibrium selection, because I think that is something that caused a little bit of confusion in the last lesson, that a Nash equilibrium doesn't necessarily tell you that this is actually the strategy that people play. There's a fine difference here. So we will talk about some additional ideas how we can actually determine which of the Nash equilibria are actually chosen, or if any, and especially in the case when there are multiple equilibria. Then we will continue with the workshop and the activities. I think we will play 3 more games, which I hope are quite interesting. And yeah, you can again earn some more money there, some more points. So what is game theory? Game theory studies strategic situations where the outcome of each participant or player depends on the actions of all others. It formulates models to represent these scenarios and predicts the most likely or optimal outcomes. And this is quite important, that it needs to be some interaction between the players, right? If there's no interaction between the player, there's basically no game here. Game theory in Web3, in the context of blockchains, game theoretic reasoning is used for modeling and understanding, but the term is heavily overused, right? You hear it everywhere, but 9 out of 10 times when people say this, they are simply meaning like some economic intuition, or mostly talking about incentives, but it's not really, most of them, they are not showing some game theoretic analysis. They just like drop the term and everybody thinks like, ooh, it's game theory. And yeah, that's it. I think that is very important for you to understand that most of the time, the stuff that people are talking about have not much to do about game theory. So on the one hand, it can be used to modeling, of course. It can be used to design some token, macroeconomic design of a token, inflation, utility, and so on. But also for the business logic, so how the interaction of, for example, a token with different models of the protocol work. And in consensus, of course, that is a very important part where it provides sufficient incentives to guarantee that participating nodes agree on a distributed state of the network. And this is basically what I was referring to at the beginning of last lesson, where I said that cryptography is only one part of it. Like, it shows you how something can be secured, but it's not really showing you whether people are actually using the right processes. And of course, it's also important in collaboration, in nudging aggregated human behavior and their interactions with the protocol. On the other hand, it is also useful to understand other protocols or the interaction between different protocols on a more macroeconomic level and how finite resources are allocated among them. And it's also important for security, where you can test economic security of protocols against various types of attacks. Of course, in that sense, economic attacks, because again, if the hashing function is, or if the crypto is faulty, that doesn't have to do much with game theory. You're more interested here in the economic side of things. So let's talk briefly about the history of game theory. And early kind of game theoretic considerations go back already to ancient times. There's one example in Plato's text where Socrates recalls the following considerations of a commentator of the Battle of Delium. I think it was between the Athens and some other group. Yeah, sorry. Okay. He was depicting an example of a soldier that is considering his options in battle, right? And if his side is likely to win, then his personal contribution might not be essential, right? Because it's only one person, and but he still risks injury or death. But if his side is actually likely to lose, then his risk of injury and death increases, and his contribution is also meaningless because they are going to lose. So this reasoning might suggest that the soldier is actually better off just running away. But if everybody thinks like this, I mean, everybody would run away from the beginning of the battle, right? Because there's like no reason to stay. And this could, cause this self-fulfilling prophecy. So this kind of thinking about, what is my best action, but if actually other people believe or think about that, they will change their behavior, is already like quite interesting and going back to ancient times. So Spanish conqueror Cortes, maybe, I'm not sure whether he knew about that, but he figured it out when landing in Mexico. He was with a very small force, I think like 115 troops or something. And they were facing the Aztecs with like tens of thousands of soldiers. And what he did is actually remove this consideration from the game by burning their ships, right? He actually burned his own ships and said that, no, there's no way to go anymore. You need to stay here and actually fight. Then there's some game theoretic research. It wasn't coined like this in the early 19th century. And that is actually from Antoine Augustin Cournot, which is a French mathematician, in 1844. And that is basically the Cournot game that we played, right? It has a lot of things of a game, but back then it wasn't called game theory. It was just some economic problem. But he was actually already proposing the solution that I showed you quickly on screen back then. Then in the 20th century, there was starting to get this systematic study of games with mathematically and logically sound frameworks. And there was when game theory actually was kind of officially born and used in a more rigorous way. Modern game theory is basically everywhere in all the sciences, in economics, biology, sociology, political science, psychology, and others. So, for example, in biology, it's the question: why do some forms of animals cooperate with each other? Why do they, whether they decide to fight or to flight? And in political science, it's of course the art of conflict in a way. Like when we have like stalemates in war, or like nuclear war, like was also a very famous example of how a game was modeled back then. Yeah, and in economics, game theory is used to analyze many different strategic situations, like auctions, that is what we see tomorrow, but also in industrial economics and business administration. So, game theory is abstract. It models, or it aims to get the essence of some strategic problem. And I think that is also something that we saw several times here in discussions, that there are just like many factors actually influencing some situations, and they are all kind of valid, but if you include too many of them, you don't know what's going on anymore, right? And in game theory, you try to abstract all of that away and really focus on the main strategic problem. And of course, this requires many simplifying assumptions. And the benefit of this is that it makes the problem actually tangible, right? You can actually analyze it, and it helps to identify the main incentives at work. But it certainly lacks some part of realism, and it makes it, often doubtful of how these results actually translate to the real life. And that is something that we saw in the ultimatum game, right? Like if you make the game theoretic analysis of the ultimatum game, there would be a minimal offer and everybody would accept. That is basically, and then you would assume this is the true state of the world. I can design my models in that way and so on. But then, there are different branches in economics that actually say, hey, let's actually put this to the test and actually ask real people to behave, and let's see how they do that. But in any way, modeling a strategic situation always has this trade-off, because sometimes you're interested in some specific factor to make it a little bit more complex, to map it a little bit better to the real life. But then you always need to know that you sacrifice something on maybe the modeling side or the analysis side, that it's not that easy to analyze anymore. And some of the things that of course lack in reality, people often have more choices than we present, right? Like, for example, I kind of forced you to play this game, but maybe somebody could say, I abstain, I don't even want to play the game. In that sense, this wasn't like an option in the drop-down menu or something. Would maybe map to the same decision or to the same offer, but maybe it would have been a different signal to the other person, right? Yeah, so now let's talk about what is a game, the economic definition. So a game is a strategic interaction among several players that defines common knowledge about the following properties: all the possible actions of the player, so the player needs to know what actually actions are available; all the possible outcomes, so the players need to know in which actions map to which outcomes, or which combination of actions map to which outcomes. And also how the players value the different outcomes, right? This goes a little bit back into this direction, where you need to have some payout or some utility function for all the different outcomes. So if you play it with money, this is rather easy because it's very comparable, and the underlying assumption is actually that you want more money. You prefer more money to less money, which is quite reasonable. It's not always the truth, but it is quite reasonable. And yeah, so let's define common knowledge. An event X is common knowledge if everybody knows X, and everybody knows that everybody knows X, and everybody knows that everybody knows that everybody knows X, and so on. And we will see, one of the first games I think we play, this will be quite an interesting application there. Okay, so for common knowledge, for example, in auctions, when you have the bids, you can actually observe the bids, but you also know which kind of bids are available to each player. And then, of course, the outcome, how different bids map to the outcome. Under which rule do you play the auction, which bid is actually causing which winner, and so on. And then we also saw it in price competition, for example, in the Cournot game between firms. You all knew the payout function. You all knew what the other player was, which actions the other player would be able to choose. And you all knew that if you make an assumption of how the player react, and how you react, you could perfectly calculate all the outcomes, right? There was no uncertainty there. Then game theory distinguishes between static and dynamic games, and between complete and incomplete games. And for example, in the static games, all players take their actions at the same time. Or in the dynamic game, players move sequentially and possibly multiple times, at least partially observing previous actions. Right, so both the Ultimatum game and the Cournot game were actually dynamic games. The Cournot game went over several rounds. So the one round of the Cournot game was actually a static game, but since we played it several times for several rounds, it became a dynamic game. And even though that we played the Ultimatum game only for one round, it was still a sequential game because player 2 needed to wait first on the decision of player 1. So there's a way that you can actually transform this into a static game where player 2 actually gives a decision on every possible action of player 1. Right? Like instead of waiting for the offer of player 1, we could also just ask player 2 to give an answer like, what if the player 1 offered you 10? Then you're going to reject. 20, you're going to reject. 30, maybe accept, and so on. And then it becomes a static game. But the way that we played it, it was a dynamic game. Some other simple examples are rock, paper, scissors, or tic-tac-toe for the dynamic game, right? In the static game, so sometimes you try to be a little slower than the other one, and making it into a dynamic game, which would be quite easy then to actually beat the opponent. But ideally, you show at the same time which action you want to take. As an economic example, there are sealed bid auctions where basically people write down their bid and they put it into an envelope. Everybody does that simultaneously. And then at the end, the auctioneer opens every envelope and basically decides who will be winning. And there's like no interaction between the players, right? Like the outcomes, of course, are interactive, but it's not like we need to wait for some other decision. And then, of course, there's the English auction where the price actually increases and you can bid over time and your next bid actually depends on the bid before and so on. The representation for these kind of games will be, for the static games, will be a payoff matrix, and we will be focusing on this. And for the dynamic games, there's actually the decision tree where you would plot or you would graph the different games as a decision tree and then put them all together. And then we can do something like I said before, where you start to analyze the lowest game and deduce backwards the solution for the first one. But we will actually focus on the payout matrices. Then there's also completeness of information in games. So there's a game of complete information where all the information relevant to decision making is known. So for example, chess, like the board is open, you can see exactly what the state of the game is, and you also know exactly what actions the other one can take. But then there's also a game of incomplete information where not all the information relevant to the decision maker is known. For example, poker, there you have, depending on which type you play, you probably have like a shared set of cards which everybody knows. Then you know your own cards, but of course you don't know the cards of the other one. There's some economic examples such as the sealed auction for seized Bitcoin, where I guess the price of Bitcoin is known to everybody also. And then a game of incomplete information, which is quite bothering, I guess, for also other people, is like used car market, where actually you don't actually know all the information of the car, and there could be some hidden information there. So, for example, imagine this. There's 3 firms want to hire an engineer, and the engineer brings added value to each firm of $300,000 US per year. The payoff of the firm is known by everybody to be 300,000 minus the salary. The payoff to the engineer is salary minus cost of working, which is also known for everyone. And all the firms make a salary offer at the same time. Is this game a static or a dynamic one? Just shout it out. Static. Static? Yeah, that's correct. What we would need to change to make it dynamic? Now you might need to make
that each one of the firms knows what the other firm has offered.
Exactly, and they would offer sequentially, right? And that's very important what you said, they need to know what the other one offered, because if they all offered like at the same time, then it would still be static. Then is it a game of complete or incomplete information? Complete? Yeah, complete. What needs to change for it to be incomplete? Yeah, Mike, I think somebody shouted.
To this to cover how much are the engineer gaining from each firm, that will make it.
But from the perspective of one firm offering?
Again, sorry?
But from the perspective of one firm, if they what would be if they want to offer something to the engineer?
For being dynamic, right?
No, incomplete information.
Sorry, I missed the train
okay.
of thought. Sorry,
yeah.
sorry.
Behind you is somebody that wants to answer.
So it would be incomplete if the engineer brings different value to each firm, and the firm does not know how much value it would bring.
Okay, the last part is the important part, because if he brings different or value to each firm, but this is known to every firm, that doesn't matter, right? There needs to be some uncertainty about the payoffs here. Yeah. So yeah, we focus mostly on static games with complete information, but we will also in the auction lecture tomorrow look a little bit more into dynamic games also with incomplete information. So one very important concept in game theory is utility. Does somebody know roughly what that is or what concept that is? Okay, nice. Okay, so it is a core concept in game theory, and it is a little bit what I'm referring to before, that it can transform any outcome to some value that is comparable, and that is actually some additional stage on top of money, right? Because money can also have different utility to you, and I will also say that later. So, for example, yeah, what is better? Scenario A, going for a vacation to France and drink wine, or scenario B, going to Germany and drink beer? Like in a game theoretic perspective, you need to attach some values to this, because otherwise you cannot investigate or analyze this game. So what would happen is that you would need to know the agent, right? You would need to know the agent, and the utility of the situation A might be 5 for one agent, and might be 3 for utility of the situation B, might be 3 for that agent. But the utility function, the function that actually translates this situation to the value, might be different between different people. Right? Like somebody doesn't like beer, of course, I mean, for them it might be a very low utility. I mean, Germany is still nice, but if you don't like the beer, maybe you want to go to France then. And the essential assumption here is that agents are utility maximizers. They always try to maximize the utility. They try to get as much utility as possible. And what is here important is that monetary payouts can also be transformed into utility. And the simplest assumption is that the utility of some value X is X, right? Like if the utility of 100 euros is 100, that is quite a simplifying assumption. But that might not be true in reality, right? Because everything has kind of diminishing scales of return, right? It could be that at the beginning 100 euros is much more valuable than at the end to you, because you already have enough money, because if Bill Gates get another 100 euros, he probably doesn't care, but a homeless person getting 100 euros has like huge utility, right? Exactly. So Let's talk about the most common games here. And one that is the most important, I would say, is the prisoner's dilemma. Who has heard of the prisoner's dilemma? Okay, nice. A few, yeah. And it actually maps a fundamental problem that we see basically everywhere in life, which is that even though everyone knows there is a socially optimal course of action, no one will take it because they're rational utility maximizers. And in the way that we analyze this, it's a static game of complete information. So let's think about this situation, about Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde are accused of robbing 2 banks. The evidence for the first robbery is overwhelming and will certainly lead to a conviction with 2 years of jail. Right? There's like no way that they can get out of jail. But the evidence for the second robbery is not sufficient, and they will be convicted only if at least one of them confesses to it. And now is the part that they actually are interrogated in different rooms, so they don't know what the other person is doing. So in the interrogation, they both are offered the following. If you both confess, you both go to jail for 4 years. If you do not confess, but your partner does, you go to jail for 5 years. 1 extra year for obstruction of justice. However, if you confess, but your partner does not, we reduce your jail time to 1 year. And here's basically this kind of game in a matrix form. So on here we see Bonnie, and there we see Clyde, and both of them, in this very simplified assumption, they have 2 options. They can either cooperate with each other and don't say anything, or they can confess their crimes and basically defect on the other one, right? Because they would say that, no, we did it, right? Like we did it together. And there we can also see what I said at the beginning. This is, of course, a very simplifying assumption. You know, some of you might shout like, but there's different options, right? Maybe there's another option where you hit a phone and try to call Clyde and say like, you know, there's a lot of different things that could happen in real life, but we want to analyze this very systematic thing and very basic thing. So that is actually the payout metrics, and it is in years of prison, right? So if they both cooperate, if they don't say anything to the police, then both go to jail for 2 years, right? Because as you remember, there's this first overwhelming evidence. They will go to jail, but because they didn't say anything, they cannot pin the second robbery on them, so they only go to jail for 2 years. Then there's the situation where actually Bonnie doesn't say anything, and Clyde actually says anything and says, yeah, okay, we did it. Then they reduce the jail time of Clyde because he cooperated to 1 year, and they sent Bonnie to prison for 5 years. And since this game is designed to be symmetric, we can of course swap this out. So if Bonnie actually defects and Clyde cooperates, then he goes 5 years to jail. And if they both defect, if they both say we did it, then they can actually pin the second robbery on them and have them for both robberies and send them both to jail for 4 years. Here, the second payout, the second number is always is the one from Clyde and the first one from Bonnie. So now we talk about another quite important concept, which is the Nash equilibrium. And it's again a fundamental concept in game theory. And a Nash equilibrium is defined as a set of strategies, one for each player, such that no player can unilaterally improve their outcome by changing their strategy, assuming that the other player's strategy remain the same. And I think this is very important, and this often leads to some confusion, especially when we talk about outcomes. Like, it doesn't mean the payout is maximized, right? It doesn't mean I'm maximizing my payout by playing the strategy. It doesn't mean that both players at the end of the game actually have the highest payout collectively. So let's try to find the Nash equilibrium in this game. This is the game just as before. Bonnie is in red. Bonnie can cooperate and defect. Clyde is in blue, can either cooperate or defect. So what we will do now is we fix one of the strategies and then look from, so for example, we fix the strategy from Bonnie and then see what is the best strategy of Clyde. So here, let's say we fix the strategy of Bonnie. So we say, assume she's cooperating. What do we do? I mean, if I also cooperate, I go to jail for 2 years. Right? 2 years is actually worse than 1 year. So I will defect. So we can mark that. Then we fix the other strategy from Bonnie and say that, okay, we assume that she defects. What do? I mean, if she defects and I cooperate, I go to jail for 5 years. Well, that doesn't sound better than 4 years. So I will also defect. Right? He has the choice between these two then. So now that we mark these kind of two strategies, we can swap it around and actually fix the strategy of Clyde and look into the perspective of Bonnie. And we say that, hey, let's assume Clyde cooperates. What should Bonnie do? If Bonnie cooperates, she gets 2 years of jail. If she defects, she gets 1 year. So she also defects. The last step is to fix this strategy here and then again ask, what would Bonnie do? We can again see that 5 years is worse than 4 years. So she will defect. And now we found a Nash equilibrium where both of these best responses interact. And we can see that this is only the case here. Right? Here are both the best responses if we assume that the other player plays the same. So the only Nash equilibrium in this game is to defect. Both defect. For example, you could ask now, I mean, now we found the Nash equilibrium, or we believe that we found it. And you could ask, how can we test that? You could say that, well, let's assume you're Bonnie and or you're Clyde, and you assume that Bonnie cooperates. Would you still defect? Then you're in this situation, and yeah, you would switch over here. So basically, you cannot, like Clyde, cannot increase their payoff if we fix the strategy of Bonnie. And that is very important to know because it doesn't mean that Clyde maximized their payout, right? I mean, Clyde would like to be here. He would only like to be in jail for 1 year, but it's not maximizing his payout. It's also not maximizing her payout, right? And most importantly, it isn't maximizing the overall utility, right? Because for both of them jointly, it would be best to cooperate. And that is the essence of this game, and basically what we see all around the world, that is actually, it would be good for everybody to just cooperate, but it doesn't work often because it makes more sense. So if we believe we are in this state, both cooperate, then of course for both of them, it's actually better not to cooperate anymore and be even 1 year less in jail, right? And this is basically the fundamental principle. It draws both players to defect, even though it would be better for both of them to not defect.
So, yes. So are we saying that betrayal is now the best way and that we cannot cooperate?
I mean, what do you mean by best way? But you have to define what is best way. Of course, the best outcome for both of them would be to cooperate.
Yeah. In total, yeah.
But it's not a Nash equilibrium. Because if I believe that if my partner is cooperating, I should be defecting. And now the question is, what are mechanisms that we can do to actually force cooperation, right? Maybe if they play this game like more often in reality, or maybe if they love each other very much and like these other factors come in, right?
Or you say, I will kill you if you,
Yeah, exactly. You basically build a game outside the game, right? You say, this is a game, but actually there's another game where I kill you, and this actually affects the payout here. But in this scenario, the only solution is, the only Nash equilibrium is both defecting. Betrayal. It is definitely betrayal. Yeah.
So you are assuming the only thing that matters is your own outcome.
Yes, yes. And that is already hinting into some direction, right? Like, maybe it's not only my payout, maybe I like the other person or something, right? But in the Nash equilibrium, there's no notion of this, right? You are maximizing your own utility, and your own utility, some simplifying assumption we did here is you want to spend less time in jail than more, which is kind of okay to do. And yeah, you only minimize the amount of jail time for yourself.
This might be obvious, but when we say that we fix the decisions of the other player, we are assuming that they're just being as selfish as possible, yes?
No. We literally fix every strategy. We don't assume anything. We just fix the strategy. If there's some strategy that's super stupid, we would still fix it and then see what is our best response to it. And the Nash equilibrium is where both best responses interact. And in that situation, you cannot deviate because your best response, it is already your best response, right?
Okay.
What are we actually proving with this game then?
What are we proving? Can you elaborate? What do you mean?
Yeah.
Who proves what? I'm like.
Yeah.
So what this should show you is that it would be great if they both cooperated, but the theory says they won't. We will see more examples of this. Okay.
Wait.
Marcus?
Does it change the outcome if the defect situation the number of years are still capped at 2, or is the scenario is the same?
Sorry,
So meaning instead of 1-5, it become 2-5 and 5-2.
No, I don't think it would change because.
So it's still the
No,
same outcome, right?
Wait, would it? You said here it's 5-2.
So they don't get a discount if they defect. It will still be the same outcome, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, you would. Yeah. I think they would either play this or this. They don't care, but it wouldn't remove this one as best response. Yes.
What he's saying is if you remove the incentive, I don't think then it's going to be 4-4. Because what would be the incentive of defecting if it doesn't increases?
Can you elaborate on that?
So see, I think the person asked the question that in case Bonnie defected, but she still has to go for 2 years,
Yeah.
right? Why would she defect?
Because she doesn't care. She doesn't care because between cooperation and defecting, right? I mean, it's the same output. Like, it's indifferent.
Yeah, but if both of them defect, then it's 4, right? But why would you defect if it's not incentivized?
But you fix the strategy of Clyde to be cooperating, right? If he cooperates, then you don't care between cooperation and defecting because both is 2 for you.
Yeah, so it's 50-50. So why is 4 and 4 there? You see, he's also saying that I think the third row and second, there also is saying 2, right? So there is no incentive for even Clyde to defect. So there will be if there is no incentive, there will not be any game theory.
But I think he doesn't care between the two cooperate because it's the same value, right? 2 and 2. So he doesn't care between the two. I mean, okay, maybe I don't see something. I can solve the game maybe after class with the new values, and then we can talk about it. Okay. But yeah, let's see if the Nash changes. Maybe it does. Maybe I don't see something. Okay. So yeah, remember, a Nash equilibrium describes a set of strategies. So you always need the full set of all players, such that no player unilaterally increases their payout by deviating, by changing another strategy, assuming the other player's strategy is fixed. So a Nash equilibrium doesn't mean that payouts of players are maximized, right? Either individually or collectively. And that is the whole big problem of the prisoner's dilemma. Like, it would be collectively maximized if they would just cooperate. One small thing that I want to say is that it's even like defecting is even a little bit stronger here because it is a dominant strategy. And a dominant strategy, I think somebody else used it before, a dominant strategy is a strategy that works if you don't have to think about the other person. Like, you always do the same. In that sense, since they both defect in every scenario, it's even a dominant strategy. So it's a little bit stronger, right? Like, I don't even need to know, even to think about what the other person does. I always defect. So, as I said, in real life, who has some ideas where this could be? Yes. Give him a mic.
So I actually also posted a video about it in Discord, and I think it's super interesting, and I recommend people to watch it. But basically, like they did like a simulation of different strategies for prisoner's dilemma in like an extended, like multiple rounds scenario, but they were relating it for like equating it to the Cold War, for example.
Yeah.
Because like basically, in theory, you could say that like both the US and the USSR would have benefited if everyone just got rid of nuclear weapons, because they wouldn't have to stockpile them and waste resources and have the threat and all of that. But once one party chooses to defect, then they have the power of having nuclear weapons, and that therefore we end up in the situation now that we have nuclear weapons, because the proper, like the Nash equilibrium is to defect. But back to that video, like basically they simulated like different strategies of what happens in multiple rounds, that like each party reacts to how the other party acted, and at the end they showed it like basically the kind and kind but firm strategy.
Actually, we will come to that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Where did you see that? Like on YouTube?
I put it on Discord.
You put it on Discord?
Yeah.
You're destroying my lecture.
Yeah. Well, all the information is out there on the internet.
So I actually linked this also, I think, in the additional resources, this video at the end. It's from Veritasium, right? Exactly. Yeah. That's a very good one. We will also talk about the results there. I mean, they are talking about the study from Axelrod, right? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Nuclear arms race between the NATO and Russia. Of course, both prefer no arms race because it's just stupid to pour so much money into having nukes. But if I don't do it and the other person does it, then they have a big advantage over me, right? So my only action is to actually start with it. And so both are better off not to go into a nuclear arms race, but it still happens. Another example, OPEC limiting the oil supply is basically in the best interest of all, right? Because a more limited supply means they can have a higher price. But everybody has kind of an incentive to increase individual oil production and actually remove the profit from the other one and producing more than the other one. Let's talk about the ultimatum game. And we played it before. As I said, it's a sequential game. And the Nash equilibrium can be reasoned by backwards induction. So the proposer has the following considerations. So this was player one. What would the recipient accept? And the answer basically is every payoff larger than 0, right? Like with 0 is a little bit of a special case. 0, let's say it would be rejected or accepted with 50% probability because the other one just doesn't care, but the person has to press something, so it's random. But if we offer a little bit more than 0, we actually should assume that there will be an acceptance, right? Because more money is better than less. If I know that, I should of course offer only, since I want to maximize my own payout, only something 0 or slightly above 0. Actually, in the case of the ultimatum game, the lowest value above 0. So the proposer offering something small and the recipient always accepting is the only Nash equilibrium. Now let's talk about coordination games. The prediction kind of in the prisoner's dilemma was easy. Both will defect. This is the optimal thing to do no matter what the other player does. Right? It was a dominant strategy. But in other games, predictions of play are not so clear. One instance is the coordination game. A coordination game is a type of static game in which a player will earn a higher payoff when they select the same course of action as another player. An example is here. Player 1 and player 2 have to choose between left or right. The numbers actually represent the payoff of the players. And the players only obtain utility if they coordinate on their actions, right? So if player 2 goes left, then player 1 also wants to go left. If player 2 goes right, then player 1 will also want to go right, right? It's like a coordination game. And here, if we solve that, the only Nash equilibrium here is actually there's two Nash equilibrium, left and right, right? And by their very nature, coordination games always have multiple equilibria because that's what makes them coordination game. So now the question is, which outcome does the theory of Nash equilibrium predict in the coordination game? None, both. The problem is that the Nash equilibrium doesn't give you any prediction about which Nash equilibrium should actually be selected, right? There we need additional theory or additional ideas. And sometimes people are actually made to switch between equilibria. For example, this is a picture of Sweden, 1967, where they changed from driving on the left side to driving on the right side. I mean, it literally doesn't make any difference whether we all coordinate to go on the left side or all coordinate on the right side. Both works perfectly fine. The only thing that is important is that we all do the same, right? And this is actually the day that they switched, and it was like a complete chaos, right? Yeah, and both are Nash equilibria, driving on the left side or driving on the right side. And now we come into Schelling points. As I said, Nash equilibria doesn't predict which strategies the players actually take. And this is especially a problem, of course, if you have games with multiple equilibria. But there are some theories that offer insights in which strategies players actually take. So one of the experiments of Schelling was like, imagine you are to meet a stranger in New York City, but you cannot communicate with that person, then when and where will you choose to meet? Anybody? Who has some idea? Yes, Marcus? Yeah. Take the mic.
So if you're to meet a stranger in New York City, but you cannot communicate with the person, then where and when will you choose to meet them? I'd probably say, I mean, the most popular dense place there is Times Square in New York, and at the most popular time, which is around, Saturday night, probably.
Saturday night.
I mean, isn't that the most probable time that someone's going to be in New York?
But you want to meet that person, right? You don't want to catch them while they're there. Like the other person also thinks like, oh, where do you think is the best place to meet? Any other ideas? 12 p.m. Central Park? New Year's Eve, you need to wait 1 year maybe? Okay, like the point is literally any point and time is a Nash equilibrium, right? You just want to show up at the same spot as the other one. Most people, and I'm not sure whether that is maybe if you're American, it's more obvious, say that noon, so this was a real experiment, right? They say noon at the information booth of Grand Central Terminal. Apparently this is, if you have no idea and you need to find the other person, that is the most likely way the other person also thinks where to go. And the basic idea is if we have multiple equilibria, social norms may help you to choose one. Another thing, like just as a thought experiment, think that you're held in prison and your significant other is also held in prison and you cannot communicate with each other. And then you're asked to guess a number. And if both guess the same number, you're set free, both. And let's say you only have 3 options to choose from. 0.231, 1, or 0.823. If you both guess the same thing, you will be set free. If not, then you stay in prison. I think this is rather obvious, right? Like I guess everybody would say 1. Or if you don't like the other person, maybe not. But yeah, so what I want to say is there's like social norms, they're like focal points, like some values that just make sense, and then it's likely that you can coordinate there. So the summary so far, we have the typology of games. We talked about static and dynamic games, complete and incomplete information. We saw 3 canonical games that have been studied quite extensively in literature. So it's the Prisoner's Dilemma, the Ultimatum game, and the Coordination game. And the Prisoner's Dilemma has a unique Nash equilibrium, which is also dominant. So there's a dominant strategy, whereas the Coordination game has 2 Nash equilibria. And you can make the matrix bigger, right? It doesn't change much. And to select among multiple equilibria, the concept of a Schelling point is sometimes used. So why are these kind of concepts of equilibrium important? Often Nash equilibria predicted the behavior of others in a closed system, but you again need to understand that all the stuff that we saw here, it doesn't guarantee that people are picking it, right? But it's quite likely if it's the only one. And if it so happens to be that it's also a Schelling point, then you have a very strong prediction of user behavior here. Yes? Microphone.
Yeah, Mauricio. So, okay, I want to understand on Nash equilibrium. Does it show which one is the best to maximize your return, or it shows in a way that these choices are most likely to be taken by the participants, or does it show like both of those like features?
None of them.
Okay.
So I said before that it doesn't mean you're maximizing your payout. It really only means that you don't have an incentive to deviate. You cannot increase your payout if you fix the strategy of the other one. And it's a Nash equilibrium if that is like holding for both sides, like because you have a set of strategies. You want to have like a set of strategies for both players. And it also doesn't say, I mean, that's the whole thing about the Schelling points. It doesn't necessarily tell you that it's actually the strategy that people take. It's a very strong indication. And once a person plays that strategy, it's very hard for the other one to get out of it. But okay. Let's talk about public goods. Public goods are non-excludable. So nobody can be excluded from the consumption of the public good. and it's non-rivalrous. So my consumption does not affect yours. For example, sorry, fireworks, street lighting, right? Like fireworks, like if I look at the firework, it doesn't like bother you. Let's assume it's a big enough place. But then there are common goods. They are non-excludable, again, it's like you cannot exclude somebody from the consumption, but it's rivalrous. So my consumption is actually reducing your possibility to consume. For example, a public park, let's say it's not that big, or an office coffee machine where everybody can use it, but if I use it, I make it dirty, or I take up the space and so on. So the main difference, as I said before, is that a common good, your consumption reduces the value of the good to others. And this is called consumption externality, that you impose on others, that actually others impose on you. And the tragedy of the commons is that because you do not take this externality into account, the consumption is actually higher than it would be socially optimal. So let's talk about some stylized public good game, like how could we actually model that? So let's say we have n players, and each player has $10 each, and we have 4 players in that sense. And each player can choose how much to place into a project, between $0 and $10 again. The funds in the project are magically multiplied by some factor alpha. Let's say alpha is 2. And then the funds, after the multiplication, is split equally among all players. What would be best for the individual? What would be best for the collective? Any ideas?
I think for the individual is to put the lowest, and for the collective to put the most.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So to see that, the important part here is that actually the pot is split equally among all players, right? It's not split among all the people that contribute. So you can actually free ride on the contribution of the other ones. But if everybody contributed everything, then the pot would be the biggest from an outside perspective, right? And that is kind of the tragedy of the goods, right? Like if everybody would cooperate, and that is a little bit, again, with the prisoner's dilemma, if everybody would just cooperate, the pie would be bigger, the biggest for everybody. But individually, everybody has an incentive to free ride on the contributions of the other one. So the only Nash equilibrium here is that nobody contributes anything. And we can see that in reality in overfishing. It gives you some private benefit. You can sell the fish, but you might destroy the broader ecosystem. But it is actually, it causes damage to everybody. Like you have their own profit for yourself, and the damage is basically split among other people. Same with air pollution. Again, you produce goods, they have a private profit, but it reduces the air quality for everyone. But, of course, we want to have things like fishing, production, mining. After all that, there's also benefits in these activities. And the tragedy of the common, the problem is that this externality is not priced in. And this is driving them to inefficiently high levels. And one of the ideas is to, to actually, for example, with air pollution, you're like giving out these CO2 certificates, which actually need to be bought. So you try to internalize this cost and actually make those people pay that actually are overfishing or over polluting. They also have higher costs. So it drives down, again, their consumption. All right, welcome back. Let's have some more discussions and then we can do some more games. Let's put something here. Open source. Let's say providing open source software is like contributing to a public good, and the community will therefore sooner or later collapse. What do you say about that? Any ideas? mean, why you see why why it can be regarded as a public good, right? Like you benefit from the work of others, and it's actually, but it's nice to rewrite on the work of others and not contribute because it costs you. Why do you think it shouldn't fail? Or maybe it does, but any ideas? Yes. Here, there's a mic coming.
Hello. So I think it won't collapse because there will always be contributors, and contributors have some reputation attached to their work. So like we all earn today in blockchain space, right? We earn our reputation through GitHub, and that helps us to grow, and that's kind of an intrinsic motivation that everyone is going to have, so that they want to contribute to open source for the better good of the ecosystem of that particular technology or maybe industry as a whole. So I think that will keep continuing, and people will continue involved because of that. That is one thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like reputation, right? Like it's you get some benefit out of it. Like it's not, you don't only incur costs, but you can basically build your portfolio. Other people are actually maybe hiring you because of your contributions.
Right.
Yes, there.
So it's not always open source use it for public good. Company use it as a strategy against other company. So it's not for the good, but it's for against someone else. Like Google, Facebook's constantly produce open source product to fight each others.
So direct, like there's a direct benefit of it.
Direct benefit, so it's not going to collapse.
Okay, other ideas? One more, maybe we go first for some other.
So, hello. Yeah. Richard Stallman came up with the concept of open source by saying in the 70s, software wants to be free. And then in 91, Linux Torvalds came up with the compiler. Still, both of them were kicked out of everywhere. Even they are famous, they were kicked out of for 30 years till IBM adopted something. It's Linux Apache server. So those communities don't exist. The evolution of society around open source had to be there. Now we are in 25 years down the lane. Everything that you see is open source. Even Android is not fully open source. So for an organization to survive, even Red Hat enterprise software is not open source. So I don't see a point in saying I don't see a software that says I'm making money and I'm 100% open source.
So what are you referring? Like
community do collapse. Every time the community collapse, it moves on. The people who are working there go take a job and then that product collapse. Unless until it is funded by an organization like Web3 is funded by Polkadot, nobody will be in Web3 otherwise.
Okay, so you're actually saying this is true?
I am thinking it is true.
Okay, cool.
Hello, Johan here. I think that this is wrong because actually there are a lot of incentives to contribute to the open source. Even the greatest companies in the world, like Qualcomm or whatever, they provide more source code in the open source kernel because they're interested that other people use their products, so they make more easy to the whole community access to this to their source code and everything else. So for me, this is wrong, completely wrong. On the other hand, of course, people also have other motivations beyond that only money. So there are a lot of more interest beside like security or to keep your privacy. So I think the open source is more alive than ever, and that will continue increasing. Thank you.
People also contribute to open source software because in like a few degrees of separation, it does benefit them financially because, for example, contributing to open source project is good on your CV, and you can get a better job. Or like sometimes employers like scan open source projects to see who contributes, and if they really want people who are like, yeah, it's kind of like a CV in a way, you know.
Yeah, that's what we said before, right? Like reputational concerns. Basically, you get a new job by showing your GitHub and stuff. Yeah. There's also other things, maybe reciprocity, right? So if two open source projects contribute to each other, it's kind of, you know, I contribute to your project, and hopefully you will contribute to my project. Then there's also intrinsic motivation, of course. Some people just love to program, and like they love the challenge itself, and they push their changes. I think there was a story, I don't know if it's true, and it's not open source actually, but there was this programmer that was bugged for 10 years by some bug in some closed source project. So he took a job with the company, actually joined, fixed the bug, and then quit again. I'm not sure whether that's true. But so there's some direct benefit there, right? Like maybe you are using some open source project yourself, and you want to increase, you know, the potential of the project themselves. So you contribute, and not only on your local branch, but for everybody that, and you get some benefit of it. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let's design a game. Let's design a 2x2 game. And the story goes as follows. Jack and Christine are rivals and keep taunting each other in front of others. At one time, Jack challenges Christine to a game of chicken. He proposes that they both get in their cars, drive towards each other on a road. In the middle of the distance between each other, there's a small bridge with a single lane. Whoever swerves away before the bridge chickened out. If both keep straight, there's no way to avoid a strong collision between the two cars. All friends will be present to see the result. Can take 5 minutes and design a 2x2 matrix and assign strategies and payouts. Go. Somebody has some idea? Oh man, this is annoying. Somebody wants to present their solution? Maybe somebody who didn't say so much? Yeah, you. Okay.
Well, I think that the Nash equilibrium.
Wait. We first need the metrics.
Okay, the matrix is chicken out, go straight.
Okay, for both
Okay.
players, I guess.
Yeah, for both players, yes.
Okay. Let's maybe do Jack in red or something. Okay. Can you give me the payouts?
So,
And with Jack having the first payout, please.
if Jack chicken out
Yeah.
and Kristen stay, he loses the game.
So wait, if Jack chickens out and Christine stays, we are here, right?
Yeah,
He loses the game.
yeah.
0-1. Okay.
0.
Let's go for 0 for Jack. One, huh? Is that red? Yeah. Okay.
And the opposite, if he stays and Christine chicken outs, he wins the game. So it's still symmetry.
Yeah. Sounds good.
And if both chicken out,
Yeah.
I would say both lose the game, but they are still alive. So it's not a. So there would be a better choice than both staying.
What is the payout here? What should we put here?
So let's put half for both.
Okay.
And actually, yeah, it would be if both stay, it would be -1 for both.
Okay. Why?
Because it's worse than just chicken out.
Yeah.
I suppose.
If they collide, it's pretty sure that they have some
Yeah.
damage, right? Okay. So that's it. Where's the Nash equilibrium here?
It's both stay and go to die, I believe. I don't
Okay.
know.
So let's check, okay? So let's pretend Christine chickens out. What should Jack do? He should stay, of course.
Yes.
What if she stays? Well, he should chicken out. No?
Yeah.
Now, what if Jack chickens out? She should stay. What if he stays? She should chicken out.
Yeah, so there are two Nash equilibriums.
Nice. Okay.
Stay.
So we have this one and this one,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Okay, so it's not a Nash equilibrium that both stay,
Yeah, right.
but we have two equilibria. And that is actually very nice, because that's actually the solution I was hoping for. So we have the solution that if Jack assumes that Christine's chickens out, he should stay, and otherwise the other way around. What does that remind you of? Anybody? Prisoner's dilemma? No. Prisoner's dilemma had one Nash equilibrium. Here, Mike, somebody? Give him the mic.
Like, maybe I'm missing something, but like, on what basis are we assigning values to chicken out and stay? To, well, basically dying or getting fame? Like, because in my chart, I gave more value to staying alive, you know? Like, and I think based on that, you can also, it changes the.
But I mean, there's being dead is the worst, right? Also
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, okay.
It's the same.
Okay, sure.
I think what's also interesting to understand now, it's like, it's actually not about the values, right?
Okay.
It's about the relative values to each other, like whether some value is bigger than the other one. Like we could multiply this by 10 and nothing would change. Mike? What kind of game does that remind you of that we talked about?
Hello, excuse me. I don't agree with this diagram because from my point of view, it depends which one is the target of the game. So you are measuring two different things. In this case, you say if someone stay and the other one chicken out, one of them wins the game. But in this stay case, you are saying they are dying, but that's not the measure that we are looking for. In this case, they both, it's a tie. It's not about dying or not dying. It's just a tie in the game. So for me, it's 0-0, also stay. And in chicken out and chicken out, it's 0-0 because you need to measure the same target in.
Okay, so I would disagree with that, but what you're saying is that if you appear to be a coward, it's the same as being dead. If that is true, in your world, of course, you can do
but
0-0.
then we need a second table to measure that.
No.
No?
Why? No. So,
Because
I mean, in this situation, okay, so if both are staying, there will be a big damage. Like maybe both will die, right? So I think it's kind of reasonable to assume that this is the worst outcome for both of them, individually and collectively, right? Like if they both stay, they run into each other and they die. If one of them chickens out, you're a chicken. Yeah. Like the assumption is that you don't want to be a chicken, right? Maybe in your world it's different, but let's say we just say that actually chickening out is not as bad as dying, but in front of all your friends you appear to be a chicken, so you don't want that. So this payout is actually less than being dead. It's actually more than being dead, sorry, it's better than being dead. But it's still not as good as if you appear to be the strong person that actually didn't chicken out, right? So if you stay and the other one chickens out, that is the best outcome for you, right?
No.
Huh? I mean, that is just the interpretation of my game, of the game. As I said, if you believe, if for some reason you say that being a chicken is the worst, I rather die, okay, then change the payout function.
Exactly, yes.
But is this a static game or dynamic game?
This is static.
Being a static game, you cannot like wait your competitors to act. When you see their decision, you decide. You cannot do that, right?
No,
It's static,
yeah,
right?
you cannot. You have to decide in the
so
moment.
the only thing I should choose as a rational person is chicken out. I don't want to die. Die is lose.
Well, but I mean, if you don't chicken out and the other one chickens out, that's actually good for you as a rational person.
I don't know, because I don't know. I don't know whether you...
I mean, that's all this says, right? Like, there's two Nash equilibria. If you know the other one is chickening out, you should not chicken out.
I don't know. I don't know whether...
I'm telling you, this is what it is there.
What?
And of course, you could interpret the game differently. As I said, maybe some person says, like, for me, it's actually better to die than to be a chicken. Then you can change the payout functions. Or, I mean, we implicitly assume, and that's actually good, some like symmetry here, but you could say, maybe for Jack, it's way worse to chicken out than for Christine, or other way around, right? It's just one interpretation of the story. Don't hang yourself up on it. If you wanted to give different values, it's fine. But this is actually the like academic or like, let's say, historical representation of the so-called chicken game. And again, what game does that remind you of? Or a class of games that we discussed. What? No, not a prisoner's dilemma. Coordination game. Okay, nice. A little bit more specific. Like, or if you look at this, it is a coordination game, but maybe you can add some slight detail here. It's an anti-coordination game, right? You basically want to do exactly the opposite of the other person. Okay. All right. So yeah, again, don't feel upset if the values don't represent what you're thinking. It can be. It's open for basically your interpretation of the story, right?
So one thing, while designing the game, if only money is involved, and in some cases life is also involved, so do we differentiate or treat?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So actually what we represented here were utilities. Like, it wasn't necessarily money, it was utility. Like, how bad is it for you to die? Or how good is it for you to appear as the strong person?
Oh.
And we just assumed symmetry here, but as I said, there can be different values. Like, what is the utility for you of being dead? It's -1 in that sense.
Makes sense.
But maybe for somebody else, it's different.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.